Welcome back to a Celtic State of Mind. I'm Paul John Dykes. Full house today with John Hughes, Paddy Sinnott, Patrick McGill. Welcome to the show, guys. It is, although it doesn't feel like it, a Champions League night this evening. Paddy Sinnott, it's all a bit flat, isn't it?
Aye, there's nothing really much. Well, I suppose there's Pride to play for, but other than that, there's not really much else that's there to play for tonight. I suppose we could, if we beat Feyenoord tonight, then we have got one over Manchester United, who will then officially be the worst team in this campaign. But I suppose if you want to play for that, then why not? But aye, all flat. Don't even know what to say.
Well, Paddy's brought up Manchester United. There's lots of chat, and you knew it was going to be coming, John. Already, Jason Cundy thinks that it's necessary to bring Celtic into a discussion about the fact that Man United have spent £600 million net in 5 seasons, and they were absolutely rotten in Europe. Let's talk about Celtic. Let's compare them to Celtic.
£110 million spent in the summer.
Yeah, it's incredible, Paddy. Incredible. You know, and I think that when you're talking about European football, European aspirations, John, it is important to know where we are in the food chain, but I think we always take that into account. My biggest issue this season is we haven't maximised our position within a group that we shouldn't be sitting here going into the final match day on a point. We've just not maximised it, have we?
Sorry, Paul, were you making that point just now, or did you just clip that from every one of the last 10 years?
Yeah, it's 6.5 years, John. I just pressed play. Champions League soundbite. Exactly.
So yeah, no, it's the same again, isn't it? I mean, it's exactly what I said last week, jokingly about being catfished, and it's the same thing again. We've been sold a pup again. We bought it again, and the thing that actually really annoyed me yesterday was Acsom did a great job at the Celtic presser. Asked Brendan the questions and asked him the question about Europe. Same question that he was asked when he came in, basically, worded slightly differently. But the answer was the same. It was as if this season hasn't happened. The answer was completely the same. Oh, yeah, I'm the man to win. That's the reason I come back, and I come back to drive us forward, and I come back to do this and come back to do that. Did you, aye? Good for you. And is there any evidence of that? How did you do that exactly? So I'm scunnered with him at the moment, actually, because I was annoyed enough about everything else. I've been, I'm glad it's Wednesday, because on Monday and Tuesday I was working on my Zen, focusing on my chi to try and get my blood pressure down below apoplectic. So right now it's just fizzing. Brendan's saying that yesterday so blithely. And just repeating what he said at the start, it's just, it's like, here we go again. It's like, as they say, it's deja vu all over again. So I'm just fed up to the back teeth with the platitudes, because we know there is no actual backing that up. There's no actions backing that up. You haven't done anything. The team is, undeniably significantly worse. And we'll come back to other people's role in that as well, but it's significantly worse. We've had injuries and all that sort of thing, but, that's what squad depth is supposed to be for. Mm-hmm. So you don't fall apart when you have an injury run. So, no, we're in a mess at the moment, I think, actually. It's all right to say we're top of the league and all the rest. Yes, that's true. But unlike the game last year, like St Mirren, for instance, which just came out the blue, this is not out the blue at all. And there are far too many parallels to the COVID season for my liking, despite the fact we're all trying to deny it. But there are just, I think we've got the same number of points or something. They're very similar, same number of wins. Or, it's just, it's very uncomfortable at the moment. I'm not happy with where we are in any part of this. I'm not happy with the players and their attitude. I'm not happy with the manager and what he's done. I'm not happy with the recruitment. Basically, I'm just pretty unhappy. That's essentially it.
John, you were talking about working yourself to the point where you're able to come on and obviously deal with this in a calm and serene manner. It reminded me of Brian McClare talking about the different levels of fuming that Alex Ferguson used to get himself into. And Brian said that it was almost like a colour chart where the most fuming was like a really deep shaded purple. He said, and then he would calm down to a madman, which was quite a deep red. He says that's when he was calm. That's what that reminded me of. And there's me just doing my name drop 5 minutes in, guys. Right, David Boyle. Rodgers says Kyogo. I want to bring this up because yesterday we kind of committed to Kyogo.
Statement.
Yeah, what? I know. The chat around Kyogo, David brings it up. It's a great point. Rodgers says Kyogo is not being asked to drop deep. If that is the case, he needs to work his system to get our wingers to hit the byline. He is talking too much in press for my liking. Not good vibes. Right, 2 points from that. I'm going to come to Patrick first. The one about Kyogo, we know he's a class player. We've seen it for 2 seasons and for stages of this season as well. But I think we're all a bit concerned about the fact that he's so anonymous in games. It was Alan Morrison last Friday dropped a bomb on me with the stat that Yang and Palma combined have played 4 successful crosses to Kyogo in the opposition box all season. 4. And I'm thinking, right, Jota used to do that every half. That's an issue. So we were wondering what's the change in Kyogo's role. Brendan Rodgers says there's been no change. He just decided to drop deep. What do you make of all that, Patrick?
Yeah, that's a concern. I mean, we all thought this was some sort of tactical change, and in the beginning of the season, you could sort of see what we all thought he was trying to do. You know, he's playing cute balls around the corner. O'Reilly was trying to get onto them. You know, Maeda was trying to get onto them, and we had a bit of success. You know, O'Reilly's obviously free scoring this season, but you know, he's scored. I think he's on 6 goals this season. Kyogo, 2 in the Champions League, 1 against Rangers, and then the other 3 are in the. So you're now looking at 3 league goals and 15 league games, which is, you know, very poor for Kyogo's standards and not good enough for a first choice Celtic striker. And it's sort of it's bewildering really to read that comment or to listen to what he said, because he obviously is dropping deeper. So the fact that he hasn't been told to do that is, I mean, does he feel starved of the ball? Is he looking to try and get on the ball more? Does he feel? I mean, people have all said it. You know, in the games where we've been poor, we're not getting the ball to Kyogo. We don't seem to have a way to get the ball up top. So I don't know whether it's something he's doing on his own, but I mean, it's a concern, and it's even more of a concern if the manager isn't telling him to do it. That stat about the 4 crosses all season is pretty. I mean, Yang doesn't really like hitting the byline. He likes sort of cutting inside with his weaker foot, which is, you know, again bewildering. But the stat about Palma is quite concerning as well. I mean, he's played almost every game. He's a good player. He's, you know, puts a good couple of crosses in, but to not be finding Kyogo, I mean, I thought another comment that you know, it was from Asim's question in the presser yesterday was quite alarming. You know, we signed 8 or 9 players. Palma seems to be the only one that's starting regularly, and Rodgers essentially said, you know, these are players for the future. And you think, well, if we're going to lose 2 or 3 key players, first team players in the summer, and we're basically not going to bother recruiting for the short term, we're just going to buy 8 players for 2-3 years down the line. Where does that leave us in the short to medium term? We're leaving ourselves short by 2 or 3 guys for 2 seasons. I mean, it's an incredible way to run a football club, and you know although he's saying, you know, these guys will mature and they'll grow into a club like Celtic, it doesn't sound as if Rodgers himself has any intent on playing them. It's a bit like, you know, the Shved comments of January 2019.
Yes, just prior to him leaving, Rodgers, that was the month before Rodgers walked out.
Sorry, Paul John, can I just say, Patrick, you're saying the concerning thing is there, you know, he's not telling him to do it. Even more concerning, why is he not telling him not to do it?
I was about to say the same thing.
That's a good point. Aye.
Yep.
You know, I mean, it's pretty basic, isn't it? You're our best striker by a country mile, and you're playing 20, 30 yards away from the goal. Get in the box.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
You know,
but
there's no point in getting in the box because there's no service.
See, you know, telling him to stay in the box, right? And Kyogo's not doing it. That again itself is a concern, because then he's going against what the manager's telling him what to do.
Yeah.
So there's all levels of wrongness about what Rodgers said. I think Rodgers has probably thought this answer will probably placate the fans and make us think that we're going to get the Kyogo back, but it's just raising more questions and giving us answers.
Yeah.
No, you're right. And the thing is, listen, I know that you could probably go into the past, like John says, and there's certain things that you've said before, but there's other things where you might contradict yourself. And I think we're all guilty of that as humans. We obviously look at every single word that comes out of Brendan Rodgers' mouth, especially when things aren't going well. We then compare it to something he might have said at the beginning of the season, said this doesn't match up. And we've got to take into account that often things will change, attitudes will change. I think one of my biggest concerns right now is that Brendan Rodgers seems to have changed a fair bit from the beginning of the season as well, his approach. And Callum McGregor, Paddy, was asked about this anger, that he spoke about after the St Johnstone game. He's never been as angry in the dressing room. And McGregor, as a captain, said, right, when the criticism is deserved, we've got to basically respond to that. And it looked as though we got a response in Perth, but it's the follow-up. It's the follow-up, right? So you get 90 minutes against Hibs where we didn't quite steamroller them like we did against Aberdeen, but it was a decent enough performance. You're going to win the game playing like that. And then Kilmarnock happens, Paddy. And you've not had a chance to talk about Kilmarnock. We've obviously got Feyenoord to talk about tonight, but you need to talk about Kilmarnock because we've spoken about European hangovers and all this before. That's a hangover. That's a point where you're looking at that game saying, wait a minute, we're still in control at half time. Kilmarnock figured out how to beat us and beat us pretty well. I was watching the final, I think it was 10 minutes of injury time, right? Probably a wee bit more. And there was a moment, Paddy, right? And I'm not just using Greg Taylor to have a kick at him, right? But he couldn't get the ball up the park, on the park. It kept going out for a by kick. And it was almost like the deja vu that John was talking about earlier. You're thinking to yourself, there's a glitch here. Can you not keep the ball in the park, keep in possession, break out? And you're talking within 10 minutes injury time, we were chasing a game that we're losing 2-1. Paddy, the frustration was beyond belief. It's almost as if, other than that St Johnstone game, once we're in a groove, we can't get out of it.
The scary thing for me was when against Kilmarnock, is we looked pretty decent in the first half, and for what we were watching the second half, Celtic had no answers to a side that's sitting fifth in the Premiership when they decided to have a go. They did not want an answer to it. We were pegged in for probably 15, 16, 17 minutes that first half, and there was nothing. There was no reaction for the players. There was no reaction seemingly for the manager. Not that I've seen anyway. It just seems to be as if they were just weathering the storm. Maybe they thought they could break up the park and score. But even at that, when they had possession, like you said, Paul John, they done nothing with it.
No.
It was either sideways, backways. The fullbacks couldn't get forward. Midfield was non-existent. I can't even remember a time when Mattarelli drove forward in the second half, like he normally does. It was bewildering watching it, and I've not seen a performance like that for a long time. And one thing, obviously, I says to you guys a good chat the other day is, if Rodgers was angry against St Johnstone, what was that reaction against Kilmarnock? He looked the calmest man on the planet, where we're all sitting turning our hair out, and he just seems to be quite lackadaisical about that 45 minutes we all just watched. So the decline in the team and the performance is worrying. Can
I just add in there, Paddy, as you're saying, the thing that I've seen people sort of criticising the midfield, and I'm like, yeah, but you've got at the back there, you've maybe got 4 out of 5 empty shots behind you, and in front of you, you've got maybe 2 out of 3, if not 3. So what are you supposed to do with that? Do you know what I mean? And it was, and he even said himself in the second half, it was the centre halves stopped playing the ball forward, stopped playing the ball. We were just pinned in. They kept playing, playing it back to Joe Hart, expecting Joe Hart to dribble up the pitch and do what. I can't stand that. I think that's the biggest cop out in football is passing it across the back for 5 minutes and then passing it back to your keeper. Can you not just kick up the pitch?
Pass forward in about the last 3 games. Mm-hmm. They're just very, very square. There's an urgency.
But even in the first half, they were better. They just dropped off, just stopped doing it. Yeah. And then you to take the fact, Greg Taylor's having one of the worst seasons I've ever seen. Nat Phillips is a competition winner, but whatever competition it wasn't a football competition. Like, how that man is getting 60, 70 grand a week, I don't know. You should be feeding the homeless with that rather than giving it to an absolute fraud of a footballer. Makes Shane Duffy look like Maradona. I've never seen a half like that. Honestly, my granny could skin her. We'd have to pay to Exhumer, but she could still do it. you know, and then and Liam Scales is having a mare because Phillips is having a mare. And you've got MJ. The fact that MJ, you know, Mikey Johnson looks so good just because he's direct. It wasn't enough before, and it's still not enough now. He is direct. He's strong. He's direct. He can contribute. He can't contribute enough, and his outcome isn't good enough for where we wanted it to be years ago, and it still isn't. But he is direct, and that makes him look brilliant in comparison to the likes of Yang. Palma is one of the laziest swines you'll ever see in a Celtic side. He refuses to track back. Greg Taylor's already struggling, and Palma's given him nothing, absolutely nothing. And when you've got your captain, in terms of that one game, shouting at the centre half, which was Liam Scales, to go to his man to make a tackle, and you've got him shouting at Palma for not showing, you've got some real problems there. You know, that's not good.
It's a knock-on, John. It's a knock-on effect.
You shouldn't be getting berated.
And it was clear for all to see. You know, the Palma thing, that really frustrated me, John, because I think of the 9 that have come in the summer, the guy that's shown more than any, I would suggest, is Palma. And he's got loads of credit on Acsom. And I've seen loads of credit on social media channels from Celtic fans talking about the good that he's done. But there is this niggle and doubt in my mind in terms of bringing players from all parts of the world, great, tapping into different markets. But they've got to have the right mentality to play for Celtic. And the mentality is that, you know, losing a game here or there isn't good enough. Dropping points isn't good enough. You've got to win every game. And this was my concern when we brought in so many players because, and I've used the percentages, 28% of your dressing room is now brand new players from all over the place who don't have that mentality. You know, McGregor would do it anyway because he's a captain, but he's got the mentality because he came through the system as well, Patrick. And I've got a wee concern about Palma and the mentality as well as the discipline because he gets booked for fun. I'm going to bring this up here from I'll Hate Him fan. Can we talk about the Palma problem, as he calls it? He's not a quality signing. Rubbish since St Johnstone. He doesn't have the pace or trickery to be a winger. No defensive work rate. Hope he proves me wrong. Now, the thing with Palma is we were praising him. And I asked the question.
I need to go. I've got somebody at my door.
No worries, mate. And I asked the question, Patrick. I asked the question: was he one of the 4 quality signings that Brendan Rodgers was referring to in the summer? Because we've seen some good performances. I'm not going to write them off. We have seen some good performances, goal contributions, the dink to O'Reilly against Motherwell. You know, we can't just say he's rubbish because he's not. But it's the mentality that I think that needs to shift with Palma. He needs to realise, Patrick, every game, doesn't matter if it's Ross County away, Atletico Madrid at home, we need to go out and win. That is an absolutely prerequisite for anybody wearing the hoops for Celtic. Do you think it's a mentality issue? Because I do think he's talented, Patrick.
Yeah, I think it is. And obviously, you can't underestimate that factor. You know, he's a young guy. I think he's only a couple of months older than I am. And he's came from a totally different continent. He's got he's got dreams of playing for Real Madrid. I can't see that based on the last couple of weeks. But you know, obviously, fancies himself. But you know, as John has said, he's not the biggest fan of tracking back. And I think that the thing that highlights it for me more than anything was the Madrid away game. You know, we went down to 10 men, disgraceful refereeing decision, right? I was sitting on the couch fuming, so I can only imagine how the players felt out there having to defend for 90 minutes over in Madrid. Game totally spoiled. But Palma must have went into that game knowing that if he gets booked, he's going to miss Lazio away. A potential crucial game. You know, he must have known that. The club must have told him, do not get booked tonight, or else you will miss the next game. And about 5 minutes after Maida gets sent off, he's moaning at the referee and he gets himself booked. Whether it's a booking or not, you know, the referee was obviously harsh to Celtic that night, but don't give him any excuse. And he gave him that excuse, and I think that's a mentality thing to be told not to get a booking, and within, you know, what's it, 23, 24 minutes of the game. I mean, you've not only sort of scuppered yourself that night, you've scuppered yourself the next night, because our wingers are how we get up the park in European games, and to be missing a guy as crucial as that. You know, we've seen it against Lazio. Forrest made one forward pass in 60 minutes against Lazio, having replaced Palma. And I think we're looking at these 9 signings and we're saying, right, we spent, 21 million, 3-4 million in Palma. He's definitely the best, I think. I don't think there's any doubt about that. In terms of what we've seen so far, I quite like Home, and I think Narowski will end up being a good player. But what we've seen so far, I think Palma's contributed the most. But he's definitely not lived up to Jota. He's went off the boil a lot in the last couple of weeks. He's not lived up to Jota, and you've obviously got to have question marks because we haven't been playing that well recently, and he is definitely part of that. You can't excuse that just because he had a really good couple of weeks back in October. So I think there's definitely still a question mark over his head.
And it's a knock-on. That's what I was saying after speaking to yourself there a moment ago, John, because if Palmer's not tracking back, there's a knock-on effect on Greg Taylor, who already isn't playing that well. If Greg Taylor's not in the correct position, Paddy, I'm going to throw this one to you. I keep watching the Kilmarnock goals, trying to figure out where Greg Taylor is, because both of them are on his side. That's where the danger is. Scales is being stretched, so I feel sorry for Scales. He's been stretched. You can see him coming over to the left to try and cover for Taylor, who's playing number 10 at that point. And then I think of the five jerseys that John was talking about in defence, I do have concerns. We're talking about 4 quality signings. I think 3 of them could go right into the back 5, Paddy.
Easily, and I think the left side has been targeted in the Champions League by Lazio, Atletico Madrid, and I'm pretty sure Feyenoord targeted it at Rotterdam. And now we've got the SPL sides targeting our left side because they know that's the weak part. It's obvious. I mean, to go back to Greg Taylor, Greg Taylor, he's played every single game this season for Celtic. He's played almost 90 minutes every game. He needs out the team. I wrote about that yesterday in TBR Celtic. As him and 2 other players just need out the team regardless. And it's not going to happen tonight because obviously we've not got the cover to do it. But he needs a rest. And we just need to freshen it up at the back. And again, to go back to the point about Palma, I think Palma is suffering for the fact that he's picking up for somebody who the Celtic fans love and adored, but pretty much like Greg Taylor did when he was signed when Kieran Tierney left. He's always going to be compared to Jota. You just can't compare somebody to Jota because he's one of the players that you get once in a generation, and you think to yourself, this guy he's something else, a bit like Kieran Tierney, and in a certain respect, I think Palmer suffered for that because we look at him and go, well, he's not a Jota. Well, of course he's not a Jota. He's a completely different player. You don't get a Jota every time you sign a winger. But what he does bring is I quite like Palmer. I think he's done really well this season.
Paddy, can I just say, it doesn't stop him running backwards.
No, of course not. John.
He might not be Jota going forwards, but it doesn't stop him running backwards.
But see, if you look at it, John, Jota didn't do it either. He didn't do it his first season at Celtic. He really only started doing it because his place was under threat by Maeda. If you remember right, I think it was last season. He started tracking back more. I didn't see him do it his first season.
I think his stats at pressing were pretty good towards the end there.
And that's when
all that front three were.
Exactly, and that's when you started seeing Jota kind of try to do that. It was towards the end of his spell at Celtic. But like I said, the back 4 is really worrying. And what is also worrying is that we can't cope with it, Cameron Carter-Vickers. We simply can't do it. And the fact that Brendan Rodgers sees Nat Phillips as a better option than Lager, Bielka, and Narowski, who he spent over £7 million on in the summer, is deeply, deeply worrying for me.
Yeah. Now, John, you've spoken about the Nat Phillips scenario. And yeah, I've read that he's on 65 grand wages with the loan player agreement. I don't know how much of that we're going to be covering, but if you want to look at the Shane Duffy transfer, whereby he was on 45 grand at Brighton and we were paying 25 grand of that, we're going to be paying at least that amount for the services of Nat Phillips. An interesting thing for me is I keep going back to quality signings, and as I say, you pour over everything Brendan says. He mentioned the fact that there were 4 players that he identified in the summer. So what I did was I had a look at the links that we had over the summer months, and in a way try to look at what kind of players do you think it was that Brendan was looking for. So put the 9 to the side at the moment because the vast majority of them are for the future, as Brendan has just said. If it was a winger, because we brought in 3 wingers and we knew we had to bring somebody.
Can I just put that to me? For the future, for whose future?
For the future, for me,
in
John.
all seriousness, what does that mean? The future,
Stop,
for whose future?
You're stockpiling players. You're stockpiling players. They can't play. There's nowhere for them to play if they're not playing for the first team.
It's a nonsense statement. It's a nonsense statement for the future. They can't get a game for the first team, as you say. We've got no second tier to speak of. Worth a damn. We can't get that many players out on loan. At least we'd be lucky to. Are we stockpiling for what? But and we're paying the majority of the wages, and we're just going to have this massive squad with a whole load of guys. The chances of making it are slim to nil, and they're never going to get anywhere near the first team. Whose future is that for? Because it's not for the team.
No, I think the board want to get lucky with a Matt O'Reilly type, a Matt O'Reilly-esque signing where they pull somebody in for $1.5 million, and if he was to be sold now, they would say, wow, 1,000% profit. Look how good we are at recruitment. That's for me, but it's not worked, and it was the wrong transfer window. If there ever is a transfer window to do it, that wasn't it.
Do you know, and as a mate of mine said the other day, you go into the pound shop, and there's a good chance you might find one or two things in there that are useful to you, but the majority of it is garbage, right? So, if you persist in shopping in the pound shop, you're going to have a lot of garbage. Exactly. So, it's again, it's not done right, and it's not done right because of where it starts from. And that was, don't want to jump ahead, Paul John, but that's Mark Wall. And I'll come back to that if you want. But, again, that's an issue.
Well, in an alternative universe, Kevin Graham will be dying to get involved in this. He loves an alternative universe. Had we gone for the winger we were actually linked to, remember we were linked to Daniel Podence. I remember talking to you about it, Patrick. Yeah. And there's a guy, yes, he's at Wolves. Yes, he'll be on big wages. He's on loan at the moment to Olympiacos. So a deal could have been done. It might not have filled us full of joy that we were bringing in a loanee, but you know what? If it's the right loanee, a la Jota and CCV, it can work. So there's a winger. We brought in 3, and we've spoken about the best of the 3 who hasn't been perfect. Goalkeeper. We were linked to Dominik Livakovic, you'll remember. He eventually left Dynamo Zagreb for Fenerbahce at a cost of around £6 million. Are we scared to buy a goalie that's going to cost us a few quid because what happened to Barkas? I don't know. But Livakovic, we've been talking all season about a new goalie. Would he have improved this team? And the other one of the only players that Brendan Rodgers actually spoke about in a press conference was Kieran Tierney. Right now, I don't think he's the answer. But in terms of a left back right now, we're talking every week about the weaknesses in the Celtic side. 2 loanees and a big money signing. Would that have, for me, Patrick, would that have improved the team rather than buying 9 players for the future? Quote John Hughes, whose future?
Oh yeah, it would have definitely. I mean, I was desperate to sign Livakovic, and I think the only possible excuse or reason you could give to the recruitment team and to the board and to the club is the wages, maybe, that these guys are being offered elsewhere. Obviously, Podence playing for Wolves in the Premier League, he's going to be on 50, 60, 70 grand. But as you say, with a loan deal, even if there isn't an option to buy, you could be having a Nat Phillips situation. I mean, we've got a guy right now, 65 grand a week on loan from a Premier League team. So we know it's possible. Yeah. And that guy's mints. He's absolutely rotten. So imagine we get a good player.
I want to start a Nat Phillips Appreciation Society here.
So imagine how much of the wages we'd be willing to cover if he was good. Livakovic obviously would have been a permanent signing. I like to think we'd have been willing to spend $6 million on a guy who was in the World Cup semi-finals, who's a penalty specialist, who's a great shot stopper, and I like to think it was the wages that stopped that. I don't know how much he's on in Turkey. I know Turkish clubs, they sort of spend the same as us, but their wages are sort of mental compared to what we pay. So, breaking a wage, it's all well and good saying, you're wasting wages here, there and everywhere. But if you break a wage structure, you do end up with guys like, McGregor, Carter Vickers, Kyogo chapping your door and going, well, I want that money as well. So I could maybe understand that depending on what he's on. But, I still would have liked us to get him. Tierney, I didn't think it would happen in the summer. Obviously, it didn't. But, I've seen I've seen things online that he's homesick or he's wanting to move back to Scotland. And if he's wanting to move back to Scotland, that only means one thing.
Motherwell.
He doesn't seem to be anywhere near the Arsenal team. Obviously, he's injured for Sociedad at the minute. I know. What was that noise? I think those three players would have improved the side. Whether how interested in them were we, I don't know. But when you look at Greg Taylor, when you look at that position, and obviously you're never going to replace a guy like Kieran Tierney, unless you bring him back, of course. But we spent 3 million in Bolingoli, mints, 3 million on Bernabei, so far contributed nothing, so you can call him mints as well. Another potential attitude problem there as well, getting himself into bother left, right and centre, on and off the park. And then Taylor, who, isn't particularly quick, isn't particularly strong, isn't tall, and outside of 18 months under Ange, hasn't been very good either. So you spent 9 million trying to replace a left back from 4.5 years ago, and you haven't really succeeded. So that shows you how good our recruitment strategy is. Regardless of how much money we're willing to spend, we can't seem to get a decent left back in.
Well, can I just say that, first of all, I just got a message through there to say the Polish keeper's wife said no to Scotland, and that was 100% verified. So that's one reason. But that's again, that's not really the point. The point is it's that quality of player you're talking about. It doesn't have to be that individual. So it's that quality player. But
I'll go back to Jim Kerr of Simple Minds fame, and he said that you never ever change your football team, but you can change your wife, your political leanings, your religion. So for me, that's not as though it's going to scupper the deal for sure. I mean, you could still sign him.
Yeah,
that's a minor detail.
At least we know Kovacevic does what he's told, though.
Yeah.
Kyogo.
Can I just raise this point? Sorry, Paul John. I just want to raise this point because I don't think people are aware of this, right? It's been put out there multiple times, but I think it's been covered off in a way such it's not widely known. So Mark Lowell, if you look at his LinkedIn profile, it still says that he was head of scouting and recruitment at the City Football Group, and that would cover all the clubs in Europe, Australia, Japan, South America, USA, and that would be for about 10 years. That is a massive job. It's an executive level job. That is a massive job. He would be part of the top executive team. That is a huge job. And apparently, he was 37 when he came to us. He was only 27 when he got it, which is absolutely remarkable. Some might say miraculous. So there's nothing available online about what he did before he got that extremely senior job at the City Group, which again is okay. That's fair enough. Seems a bit strange to give someone in that senior position. Their leadership team were all listed online. He was not mentioned at all. In 2016, both UEFA and the Times described him as City's scouting, information and content manager. Now, if you know anything about office titles, scouting, information and content manager basically means he did admin in the scouting department, right? That's what that means. So he was collating the information from the scouting reports, making sure, and content manager means putting them in a way that they could be easily understood, or they ticked all the boxes that they wanted ticked. And basically, he was far from being a top-level guy. And I'm happy to be contradicted in this if Mark wants to contradict me. You come on and tell us what you're doing, Mark. But essentially, he is at best, and I do mean at best, a middle manager of an admin department within the scouting, larger scouting department. So that's the guy. Now, I've heard Alan Morrison and people like that say, "Oh, he was an admin guy. He wasn't really a recruitment guy." But when he said that, much like I think a lot of people did, I assumed he was an admin guy, like the head of UEFA is an admin guy. Do you know what I mean? I didn't think he was an admin guy, getting the copies and essentially doing the recruitment reports, the scouting reports and collating them. And that's the guy who's in charge of our recruitment, and the other guy that works with him, Lefebvre, or whatever his name is apparently exactly the same. So it's exactly the same. So these are middle ranking, at best middle ranking, if not junior, but let's call it middle ranking and be fair. Middle ranking guys in doing admin in a recruitment department. And since Mark Lawwell has come in, we have signed 20 players. Siegrist, Bernabe, Moy, Moritz Jens, Joyce Clark, Haska, Banovic, Abelgard, Kobayashi, Alistair Johnson, Awata, Home, Tilly Yang, Kwon, Narovsky, Lager, Bielka, Palma, Phillips, Bernardo. And when you look at that list as to who has made us better, Moy made us better, Alistair Johnson made us better, and that's it. So there's guys there who have contributed nothing. There is guys there who have contributed, but they haven't made us better. And so, from the point that we were at, that's a 10% hit rate.
The thing is, John, I think you're being generous by giving him Moy, although it was under his watch. It's clear that Ange is identified.
Yeah, it was Ange. Yeah, basically. Yeah.
So that's worrying. That makes for worrying reading. How many millions is in there, John?
Well, it's basically, if you go into, Mark Lawwell being in charge there, it's like if you went into hospital and they said, and you were desperately ill and you needed something done with you, and they said, oh, don't worry, the hospital administrator's on his way. You'd be like, oh, that's great, thanks very much. Do you know what I mean? So, I don't know, but of course, it's not nepotism, because Ange knew the guy that was the office junior in the City group, and he desperately wanted him to come and do this extremely senior job of which he had no previous experience. So there's nothing to be worried about there. It was Ange's man.
On that point, though, John, we've been talking about being quite perturbed or confused by certain comments being made in pressers and all that. I'm going to go back to the AGM comment that Michael Nicholson made about the appointment, Paddy, of Mark Lawwell. And that was a bit of a concern as well, wasn't it? We've been hit with quite a few concerns through what the manager's been saying recently, but I thought Michael Nicholson's comments were quite concerning as well, that we would put all our eggs in one basket, basically, and bring the man in. What if he doesn't? Ange Postecoglou rated him, apparently. What if Brendan Rodgers doesn't? Who goes?
Who do you think?
that is a big worry, isn't it?
Aye. Who do you think is going to go? Because it's certainly not going to be the one that we want to go. I'm just absolutely flabbergasted at how far we've fallen in less than a season. Less than half a season, to be honest. I suppose you could argue the signs were maybe there towards the end of last season when Ange was obviously looking to leave Celtic, but to go for where we were, a treble winning side with designs of making it in Europe, and we all thought that could happen with the squad that we've got, with Brendan Rodgers. We blend in maybe the gung-ho style Ange Postecoglou's team and Rodgers' pragmatism. You could maybe get the balance right for Europe. It's just, the thing's just falling apart. It seems like a cheap suit, and it's worrying. But what's even more worrying is, how do we fix it? How do we move forward? How do we get past this period where there just seems to be a complete disconnect from what we're seeing to what the club are telling us to what Rodgers is saying? There's just so many things that are going wrong. The alarm bells they're not ringing anymore. I think they fell off the wall. So I don't know. Just to get back to the answer to your question, certainly what with Mark Lawwell will leave anyway. Put it that way.
The reason I'm bringing it up, it isn't because we're trying to feed into the doom and gloom. There are people who don't like watching Acsom if we're going to question anything or be apparently negative about things, but we are asking about it in such a way of, like you said, Paddy, how do we make it right? And for me, when you go into the transfer window in January, you can't make the whole thing right because we're too far down the line. We're talking, John, you were talking about for Hugh's future. If you have got a successful, let's say, half a dozen transfer windows behind you, the development players, because we all know they're great when they work, but the development players come to fruition at some point during that cycle. And I think the cycle has basically fallen off the track. That's my issue at the moment, Patrick, because that list that John read out, there's been too many transfer windows where we've not had as many hits as we need for the cycle to continue. So if you've brought in 2 or 3 development players 2 or 3 transfer windows ago, they are now developing. And at this stage, they're contributing. What's actually happened is your Bernabes and Siegrist and Kobayashi and all these guys, from way back then, there's too many not contributing.
Absolutely. And, when you're, we're talking on one hand, I think we spoke as recently as last week about having a bloated squad. I mentioned that last season, you have a Champions League squad list of 26 players, and I don't think we've ever used all 26. So if you've got less than 26 players who are good enough for the Champions League to come on as a substitute, you don't need, what have we got, 33 players at the moment? So we've got a bloated squad, and yet we're buying 8 players for years down the line. So as John says, this is just a nonsense strategy, and it's a strategy which we might all like to think that we're copying the City Football Group by doing this. We're going to have loads of young players, we're going to send them out on loan, and in a couple of years they're going to be brilliant, and then we're going to sell them on for big money and we're going to scale up. And I think the problem is if we, well, for one, we don't seem to want to scale up. We buy players for 3 million, we sell them for 10 or 20, and then we just keep on buying them for 3 million. I mean, we were buying guys like Pookie and stuff for 3 million 10 years ago. We thought we'd made a change with Carter, Vickers and Jota. We've obviously sold Jota for money, and then we're doing the exact same thing. We're buying second division Swedish and Korean players. And the risk is, when this goes wrong, instead of being like the City Football Group, you end up like Chelsea. Chelsea, I think, at one point had 90 first-team players, most of which were out on loan. And then what happens when, you have a couple of bad seasons, you're not in the Champions League, all of a sudden it's panic stations. So we're obviously, the recruitment is absolutely lamentable over the last 3-4 windows, and looking towards tonight, I have absolutely no hope of winning tonight. There is nothing I can point to that would indicate that we're going to win the game tonight. I don't think we've got a better manager, because Tottenham expressed an interest in Arne Slot, and they didn't express an interest in Brendan Rodgers. So you've got to assume they've got a better manager. They've definitely got a better squad. They've got a better record in Europe. And I think, after tonight, they'll probably have a better record at Celtic Park in the Champions League over the last 10 years than we will. It's absolutely extraordinary. I've been a season ticket holder for 10 years. I've yet to see us win a Champions League game. So I've got absolutely nothing to point to think that we will win the game tonight. So it shows you where we are. And we've got a club, across the road, 10 years old. They might be recording losses every year, but they got to a European final, albeit very lucky. A lot of fluke results there at home, but they can win knockout games, no bother. And yet we are world class in several departments, according to Michael Nicholson, and can win a European game.
A harsh slice of realism from Patrick McGilp. And by the way,
just after you were saying, people don't like listening to criticism and negativity, I went on a wee rant there. So apologies if we've lost a bit.
That's all right. The positive thing is, Patrick, they all get an increase in their pay, so and bonuses. So that's very positive. Good for them.
The other positive, John, is I now know that for the Christmas mug next year that I get for Patrick, his motto will be mince. We've got hee-haw for Jimmo and various others for other people, but yours is definitely mince. Every signing that we've brought in that hasn't worked out is described as mince. There you go. Sell 88. For some, it absolutely is. Need to get this no-win record offer back tonight. Right, Patrick doesn't think we're going to sell 88. I was talking about, you need to get that monkey off your back. And others are pointing out that there is a financial element to it. Absolutely, I get it. When it comes to the coefficient, it didn't seem as though Brendan Rodgers cares about that yesterday when he was asked that question. I'm more interested, John, about the momentum, easy for me to say, from now until the 30th of December. I know you're going to be coming back to Scotland for the game, John. We need to start preparing for that, but putting in the results and putting in the performances.
They absolutely need a reaction tonight, and they need a performance. Look, we have a puncher's chance tonight, and as much as they're going to play their reserves almost certainly, and they'll bank on their reserves to take the point, because their only motivation is the money as well. So they couldn't really care less. It depends how much they need the money, I suppose, but there's no reason why they just shouldn't play all their reserves. You could argue that we should play our reserves, whoever they are. Most of them are in the first team at the moment. Look to the weekend and look to the league, because this is a dead rubber for us apart from money. Now, look, again, there's the argument. I will never not support Celtic, but there is the argument here that has been made elsewhere that a win tonight allows the board to cover their blushes and just get away with it again. I just say we've made progress when clearly we haven't. It's a dead rubber. We're already out. The game is meaningless. And whatever points we take for tonight is handy financially, but it means nothing in terms of progress because, again, we're playing against a team that don't care. So, for us, I agree with you 100%, Paul John. We have been so inconsistent and, so poor in patches that we absolutely need to get back on track. And we need to get back on track not for this game, but for the next game. And the next game, maybe try and get 3 games in a row even, where we could get a result. That would be lovely. And then it's not just about the consistency tonight. What really, you're talking about winning the game. As I say, puncher's chance. I don't see how that happens unless they genuinely put the reserves out. We are not good enough, even at our best at the moment with the personnel that we have. I don't think we're good enough to win it. We're good enough to potentially get a draw if we play the way we played before, but I don't think, again, the personnel that we have at the moment are good enough, and the forum is not good enough. And my concern is, with that defence, if Carter Vickers isn't back, do we know if he's back?
He's not playing today.
Carter Vickers and Maeda are out for tonight, aren't they?
Yeah.
So basically, I was hoping he'd be back. If he decides to persist with Phillips, first of all, I have to question his sanity. I also have to question whether Narovski has suffered some horrific car accident we didn't know is now a double leg amputee. Because, he would still be faster than Phillips on the turn. It's shocking. So if he plays Phillips again, I have to question the manager's sanity. Narovski, when he came in, looked at a solid player. So I don't know what the issue is with him. We know he doesn't like Lagerbielke, doesn't think he's fast enough. That's fair enough. But Narovski looked fine. So, I mean, what is he doing in training that Phillips looks better on? Because Phillips is shocking. And now, I don't like to single out players like this, but Phillips isn't our player. He's never going to be our player. So he's going to go back to whatever he's going for and milk them for whatever money. But look, we've got players there that could play. And quite frankly, my concern tonight is not taking a humiliating pummeling. And if we play anything like we played in that second half of the weekend, we will be destroyed. It'll be 6-0 by half-time, never mind full-time. Right? So I would say this, and when we're talking about 3-5-2, and I've been saying for weeks that we should play 3-5-2, and people saying, we don't have wing-backs. Well, I'll tell you what you do. Play Greg Taylor and play Ralston. So you've got your 3 central defenders. We can drop to a back 5, which we need to do potentially. Play a Waka, we can drop to a back 6, which we might need to do. But we still have O and Kyogo up front to break on the counter because we need that defence to be far, far more solid than it is. And we're talking about it's other teams that play 5 at the back, potentially not us. Well, both Ralston and Taylor's effectively, his best season has essentially been as a midfielder. Ralston's strength is going forward and hitting the byline, and he's very good at it. So play them as wing backs with your central 3, play Narovski and play Scales and play AJ. And Scales has played left back, AJ has played at the right of a central 3. I've been saying this for weeks and weeks and weeks. Now, that wouldn't necessarily be the team you'd want to play domestically, but it definitely is for this game. Because we could be pummeled here, absolutely pummeled.
The problem is you can't play Narovski because he's not registered.
He's not registered, but
if you're not, it's a Lagerbielke, then it has to be.
Lagerbielke need to be, yeah.
I was going to say about Phillips, Narowski, because he was injured when we obviously put the registration through for the players. He's not registered for the games. Registration had to go through. But see, with Phillips, John.
Sorry, question, Paul. Sorry, I do apologise. Didn't mean to interrupt. Welsh. Is Welsh in the squad?
He's training. You could see him training. Yeah.
Is Welsh in the Champions League squad?
Stephen Welsh. I'm going to say he is, because
I think he's a coefficient, is he not?
Yeah, he is. He is in the squad. Yeah.
Right, okay. So what's happened? What's happened to Stephen Welsh? Because again, I would take Stephen Welsh any day of the week over your man Phillips.
On that point, John, is Phillips Rodgers' man? Is Phillips the player?
He definitely is. Of course he is. That's why he's in there. He's the only contribution that Brendan has made to the actual recruitment. Very clearly, he's Brendan's man. He's a Liverpool man. How do you think we got that connect?
This is the thing. This is the thing, John, because there's a few questions around that. Now, a few weeks back, Kevin Graham brought it up, and I think it's fair enough to bring it up because obviously we know how difficult the situation was that we were in. We're desperate. It's an emergency. We bring in Nat Phillips. Was it in his contract that he has to be part of the Champions League squad? I don't know. Because when you're looking at a £3 million player in Lagerbielke, not making a lot of the benches, etc., you start to wonder. But I think it's more realistic to view, and I'll throw this one to you, Paddy, see what your thoughts are, the fact that perhaps, because we don't know for sure, perhaps he was a player that Brendan Rodgers identified and wanted at the club. And that's why, and he has spoken about him in the pressers, hasn't he? And he's spoken about his personality and his influence on training, etc. He's a guy that Brendan obviously rates. I wouldn't be surprised if he starts tonight. And John, you will not be a happy man to hear that. I'll not be surprised if Nat Phillips starts tonight, Paddy.
He'll definitely
Sorry, Paddy. His influence in training, his personality. What's he doing? Is he a magician? What's he doing in training?
It goes back to that Roy Keane sketch.
His contribution. Is he putting the cones out? What's he doing? Sorry.
Card tricks apart.
Right, sorry, Paddy.
No, it's all right. He'll definitely start tonight. But what I also find interesting is that over the last, say, 10 days or so, Rodgers has been calling out players left, right and centre. But at the first opportunity he took yesterday, seemed to defend Nat Phillips by saying, "Don't blame him, blame me for Sunday." When I think the question was put to him, what you thought about Nat Phillips' performance, and what I read from what Rodgers said was it wasn't Nat Phillips' fault, it was me for picking the team. So he seems to be the only player that's getting defended in my eyes, whereas he's picking out Kyogo, he's picking out Hatate at the start of the season. He's picked Mikey Johnson, which again is a strange one, considering he's starting him, but picks him out for criticism as well. So he seems to be going at lengths to defend Phillips, whereas he's wanting to kind of maybe he's picked out Lagerbielke as well, and Narowski, who were apparently two signings. So the whole thing's totally bewildering. Whether Phillips will be here after December, I'd like to think not. But it wouldn't surprise me if he was kept on to the end of the season because he is his man. Nothing would surprise me.
John,
I'm telling you, honestly, nothing would surprise me at this moment in time.
He's 100% his man. I've had that confirmed.
Yeah,
100% his man.
I mean, the Liverpool link's are clear to say, John. So, and obviously the fact that he's refusing to criticise his performance as well is abundantly clear it's his man. So I just find the whole thing completely bewildering. It's no wonder like the players seem to be kind of going through the motions a bit because they're just fairly uninspired, I think, it's been going on in the last 10 days. It's very, very strange.
It is strange indeed. I'm going to bring in some of these comments and then I want to talk about our very own Alan Morrison. I know Alan has been part of that successful team at the Huddle Breakdown. He has contributed to Acsom for many, many years. I always love his chat because he talks about facts, he talks about data, and he presents it very, very well, does Alan Morrison. And he was on the Graham Spears podcast the other night, and I thought he was sensational. A lot of the clips have been going viral on the socials. And I want to finish off by talking about that. Before I do that, though, I'm going to bring some of these comments in. We've got John Sweeney. Have the board got that complacent by hoarding the 72 million quid? We could lose the league with an awful summer window and spending only on quality will turn this around. I think spending on quality is key, John. I absolutely do. I don't think Rangers are any great shakes, but neither are we. And I do think there's an element of complacency. You don't go into a transfer window after winning a treble, after losing 3 players of quality who contributed massively to that treble, as well as Giakoumakis and Juranovic during the season, by bringing in project signings. And that's exactly what happened. And I can only put it down to complacency. I think Patrick McGill raises a brilliant point in that Citigroup clubs stockpile players, send them all over the globe. I think at one point there was 45 players out on loan at one of the City teams, in the hope that a percentage of them come back and make you loads of money. And I think Celtic have done it dreadfully if that is the case. The Urban Culture, Copenhagen's success is a bit awkward for Lowell and Co. Conference League team with top brass and Champions League money. Copenhagen's been mentioned time and time again. Of course it is. It is a club who have spent, I think, in the region of £8 million in the summer. And they managed to make progress this season. We haven't. So, yeah, it can definitely be done. And Patrick Harold, board couldn't give a toss about progress in Europe. Just happy to collect the cash. Shambolic, says Patrick. So, John, I'll start with yourself then. We're all conspiracists. That it's all about us thinking that the referees are all Rangers fans, etc., etc., etc. If you believe a lot of the mainstream, that's what we continually get told. Alan Morrison decided to have an adult conversation about this situation with Graham Spears. And as I already said, I thought it was phenomenal, the way that Alan broke it down. Almost to the point, John, where how can you argue with it?
You can't, and this deserves a show of its own, quite frankly. The way it's been described is pattern of assistance. And it's very important that you remember that pattern of assistance because it covers a number of sins. And pattern of assistance is something you want to repeat to your friends, your family. Don't be talking about conspiracy theories or anything like that. And it's a powerful, it's a bit like if you look at Brexit, take back control or get Brexit done. What we need to get in, if you want to help the team, if you want to do something constructive to help Celtic, talk about pattern of assistance, right? You can actually make a difference with that. Don't be ranting on about Masonic conspiracies or they're all out to get us. The evidence is there. The evidence is overwhelming. If you look at what Alan was saying, apart from that ludicrous run of 71 games without a penalty, he has taken a sample size that goes back 3.5 years. Because prior to 3.5 years, there was no pattern. But now, suddenly, there's a pattern. And why did that start? Because you've had the 10, denying the 10, and you've had guaranteed Champions League money every year since. And all of a sudden, there are discernible, undeniable, overwhelming evidence of pattern, right? So, essentially, if you look at not just the 71 games, but if you look at the impact of that, so that's what he was looking at, meaningful impact as well. So if you take, because you can get penalties in a game as we do often, if you're 3-0 up, you're 4-0 up, it doesn't have any impact in the game. A man can get sent off, doesn't have any impact in the game, right? And he looked at that over those seasons. When are the penalties? When are the red cards? What impact have they had on the game? Now, his information comes from a referee who is completely independent, is a Sheffield Wednesday fan. He's got no skin in the game at all. So, because Alan recognises his own unconscious bias. So, basically, based on that information, Rangers have had net 26 points advantage of impact on the game. Celtic's is 5 positive impact in the game. That is a net 21 points a season to Rangers that they can take to the bank, right? Now, why is this happening? Oh, we don't know. It could be many reasons. I would strongly suggest to everyone that wants to help, you do not start talking about, Masonic conspiracies and all the rest of it, because we have to get the mainstream to acknowledge there is a problem. We must have them talking about this, because once the evidence is put to them, it is undeniable. He was talking about even, getting the penalties. You have to get in the box to get a penalty. For Celtic, it's the usual sort of thing. You have to get in Celtic's box about 68 times or 60 times, roughly. Sorry, Alan, I can't remember, to get a penalty. Rangers is 168. to get a penalty. It is clear and undeniable evidence of a pattern. It is absolutely overwhelming. And how are people motivated, if you're asking why? People are motivated by a lot of things: fear, greed, love, and also unconscious bias. And someone on that same podcast gave an example of the basketball referees, white basketball referees, giving far more fouls against black players than against the white players. And when it was pointed out, it stopped, right? But we have to get them to take us seriously. And the way to do it is everywhere you go, every conversation you're in, pattern of assistance. We're talking about Crawford Allen came back from his holidays to deal with Kyogo. Had a dodgy offside, and we got a dodgy offside goal given. Come back from his holidays to deal with that. Made a statement. There is overwhelming, undeniable evidence here of pattern of assistance. We have to get them to recognise it. And if you can contribute to Alan's work in any way, so he's Celtic by numbers, he does the huddle breakdown, send him some money, that fella, because by God, this is unbelievable work, which makes it absolutely clear that the what is happening here cannot be denied. It is not subjective. It is not conspiracy theorist. It cannot be denied. So I would just, again, reiterate, don't get dragged into those conversations that allow the MSN to dismiss us. Pattern of assistance. Just keep repeating that.
Listen, John, the first thing, Alan being Alan, it's brilliant that he's obviously employed the services of, like you say, someone who's a referee from Sheffield with no skin in the game. But Alan being Alan has described him as the Yorkshire Whistler instead of the Yorkshire Ripper. So well done, Alan, for keeping your sense of humour during the whole process. But what you've said is so important, because you could probably take it back, right, to the point where someone is brave enough in Scottish football circles, John, to actually speak out about it. And it was, I remember it was Richard Gordon. So Richard Gordon spoke about it. Graham Spears then tweeted about it. Alan Morrison is then on Graham Spears' podcast. And what you see gradually happening is that the infiltration, if you like, into the mainstream thought process that there is a pattern of assistance. And like you say, Alan's been pivotal in that, because it's not just in the last couple of weeks or this season. He's done it over a period of season upon season upon season, so that you can actually see the pattern developing within that period. And I think he deserves massive credit. Regardless of what you think about various people on that same podcast, go and give it a listen. And as John Hughes quite rightly says, get behind Alan, because I think he's done an amazing amount of work, Paddy, in bringing credibility and kudos to what we've been talking about for a long time.
No, 100%. I mean, I've not listened to it all, but like you, or like probably most folk, I've seen bits of it on Twitter. I just find it amazing nobody's asked a question. I just find that incredible that nobody's actually asked a question yet about how it seems to be happening. It just seems to be accepted. Mm-hmm. So yeah, that's my take on it. I know we're out of time.
No, but can I just add one thing before Paul John? I'm so sorry. I know I'm dominating again. So sorry, but the club needs to take this on board, because this is evidence. This is not some loon out there making things up. This is evidential, and the club must take it on board and pursue it, and it must be answered by the referees. And in a season like this one, where potentially it could be tight, again, thanks to the board, that same board must defend the club.
100%, John. You're talking about being domineering. I wish we had that at centre-half for Celtic at the moment, and also in the midfield. So absolutely no issue with it. I'll tell you what, thanks everybody for getting involved in the comments. Acsom will be back half an hour before kickoff tonight, as we always are, to be talking about the match this evening. Thanks everybody for getting involved. Thank you, John Hughes, Paddy Sinnott, Patrick McGilt, for joining me once again on A Celtic State of Mind.